Thank you. You guys are so excited. There's so much networking going on, but I think it's time to have a deep discussion on how we can really make this work and really address the huge opportunities of what we have been discussing this morning. And I'm very happy that I could convince Pierre to join me. Pierre leads the Henderson Institute. Francois. Francois Pierre.
Much more usual here.
Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
But the Henderson Institute is pretty well known. They have deep insights in where business is moving, where the impact of technology on business, the impact of governance on business. So I couldn't think of a better person to discuss this topic with than Francois. So
no problem, Philip.
So I alluded to this already this morning. There's going to be a lot of new value created in the global economy. And of course, we already seen the first big wave of this. If you look at the valuations of some of these companies, actually, Francesco put up a pretty scary slide showing that if you look at valuations of companies, that Europe is behind. But I think Europe doesn't need to be behind for long, because I think there's a new economy emerging that we can play a very pronounced and value-creating role in. And there's a lot at stake. By 2030, one of the biggest competitors of BCG, McKinsey, claimed that by 2030, $70 trillion of value will be in 12 ecosystems that will be digitally enabled. And many of them we will discuss today. But before going there, I wanted to ask Francois, what are the big changes you see in these, business configurations, business models, and how do you see that opportunity for new value creation?
So thanks a lot, Jeroen. Maybe I always like to quote Michael Porter, the famous Harvard Business School professor, who said in 1990 that the competitiveness of a nation depends on the capacity of its industry to innovate and upgrade. And I think that for us in Europe, the question about upgrade, how will our traditional companies or incumbents or SMEs, how will they really embark into this digital or AI revolution is absolutely critical, because we cannot just count on the startup nation. It's a very important part of it. We cannot just count on innovation, but we need to count on upgrading, how to adopt technologies, these new technologies, and so on. And I've been spending a significant part of my career in China. And especially since 2010, I've seen a drastic change in the way they create and they foster this adoption. And if the US today is leading innovation, China is by far leading in adoption. We did a survey where we find that more than 75% of companies in China are adopting AI one way or the other. I won't tell you that they are all extremely strong, but they adopt it, at least they try to adopt it. And what we found there, and this is why this notion of ecosystem becomes very important, is the way they are adopting it. In 2017, the government really realized that AI would play a critical role, and therefore they went to the main tech giants, the Alibaba, the Tencent, the Baidu, and others, to try to say, okay, guys, I would like you to create AI ecosystems. They asked Baidu to create one on autonomous vehicle, Alibaba on smart cities, Tencent on imagery in healthcare. But what was meant there? It was not for them to do everything, but to make sure that you have some other companies that would understand the industry, but that would help traditional companies, incumbents, embark into this journey. And by reducing the difficulty for these SMEs, for these traditional companies to embark. Because today for these traditional companies and incumbents it's very difficult, because it's very difficult for them to hire data scientists. Because when you're a data scientist, you want to go to a company that really values this, what you do. And it was very difficult for them as well to understand how to really change your processes to embark technologies.
Yeah, I think you're making a very interesting point. I think what we saw this morning is almost the wiring of a federated platform. But that's not sufficient. What you're saying is it requires way more. It requires a different way to look at your business and change probably your business models. It probably requires you to change your operating model, the way you work and your people work. But most importantly, you told me something, I'm going to ask you this question, because I think the mindset is most important. Are you open to this? Are you willing to share? Or are you still going back to, I sit on my stuff and I compete? How do you see that?
This is an interesting question in a sense that in some studies that we did, we find that European incumbents trust others much less than American incumbents or Chinese incumbents. And if you only want to, or if you believe that you can transform yourself just on your own, just buying off-the-shelf solutions or even customized solutions, it won't work. What we find is that, as you said, you need to deeply change your operating model, your business model. And to do that, it's very difficult to do it on your own. I mentioned in China where they use what I call these transformer companies, these companies with a strong knowledge of your industry, strong capabilities to give you, to provide you customized solution, but to embark you in this process of changing and transforming your company. And what we find in Europe is something very different. Companies want to buy solution, off-the-shelf solution. And what we see is that we have all these ingredients that are needed in Europe. We have what I would call transformer candidates. We have, for instance, you could look at what Connex did in Germany with Deutsche Bahn. You can see here, not far from here, Aleia, a French company that is trying to do that. But what we miss is this notion of trust. Am I ready to share my data with someone else? Am I ready to make them come and work with me? And I fear that if we are just looking at the boundaries of our company, we will miss something. And in China, we have what I call now vertical AI ecosystems, which are made of these large tech companies, these transformers, and many SMEs, and they are really developing at a stage and at a rate that has nothing that we cannot see here. And I fear that if we miss this opportunity, I used to say that Europe in the 21st century looks a bit like China in the middle of the 19th century, a great civilization, missing an industrial revolution and leaving history. And it can be very fast, 40, 30, 50 years.
I think what you say is very interesting. This morning we looked at the trust framework, so how you can automate exchange between trusted partners, but you basically say there's another level of trust. There's almost a trust and belief that you can do this together and create way more value together than on your own. And I think that's what this meeting is about, and that's what we're going to discuss today.
But doing it in data sharing and data platforms is a key enabler of it.
Last question. You mentioned China a couple of times, but I'm convinced that there are some great examples in Europe as well.
Absolutely.
You know, I personally come from the financial services industry, and I was part of the first global payment systems, which are federated systems. And today I found out I literally can pay anywhere, even where there are no roads or even without electricity on a battery with 4G. So that system has dramatically evolved, and has led to way better service, new opportunities, and innovation. Now, how can we do this in some other industries, and can you give me one or two examples?
No, you have, of course, and in payment you could think as well about what India's been doing with UPI. But I think that in the healthcare industry, I'm always really impressed by what Finland is doing. And not only in training the people, all the MOOCs that were made to help people understand what AI is about, but if you look at the FinData platform in healthcare, helping hospitals sharing data and so on, it's, I think, a good example. You have some other examples in Luxembourg as well, for instance, where they try to create a relationship between public and private in creating platforms where you will have a trusted third-party platform. So I think that these are good enablers. We have the companies. As I say, we have all the ingredients. We might lack the secret sauce, but I'm sure that with Gaia-X, we are not far to finding it.
Thanks. I think these are beautiful words to end this session with. Francois, thanks so much sharing your experience. And I think you've given all of us food for thought, and I think the next sessions will actually drill down on this when we talk about what these data spaces can do for the industries they're in. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And can I have the coordinators here?